Okay, we're going to start with a prayer. Let me switch screens.
Make us as waves of the sea, as flowers of the garden, united, agreed, through the bounties of thy love. As waves of the sea, as flowers of the garden, united, agreed, through the bounties of thy love. And make all mankind as stars shining from the same heights of glory. Make us as waves of the sea, as flowers of the garden,
Okay. Let me switch screens again. All right. Welcome everyone to the Zoom version of Northern Virginia Bahá'í Center event. I just want to point out the past events are on our recordings are on the Northern Virginia Bahá'í Center event YouTube, and we can get a link sent out for that, where this will also be posted. So we have two people with us today presenting: Stephen Ramo from Philippines and Marissa from Vienna, Virginia. So this is a continuation of Northern Virginia Bahá'í Center's series of talks exploring the different cultures that immigrants carry to America, bringing to life the promise of e pluribus unum, out of many one. Today is the Philippines, its history, culture, aspirations, and inspirations. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Ann Jones. I believe she's joining us from Florida.
Right, thank you, Peter. My honor is to introduce to you Marissa Frances Rossoukh. She became a Baha'i in Manila, Philippines, where she was born. She met Shazin Roussouk, her future husband, in Manila while he was serving as a student pioneer there. They served for 3.5 years in the Holy Land. By profession, Marissa is a nurse and nurse practitioner with extensive experience working with multinational companies. Now retired and living in Vienna, Virginia, she enjoys volunteering and serving the Baha'i community. In 2019, she established a free medical clinic at the Northern Virginia Bahá'í Center. When the pandemic crisis subsides, she will continue with the free clinic, which has been closed for a while now. I know Marissa to be an eager explorer of many different culinary avenues, but for our purposes today, you will find her very well versed in the history of the Baha'i Faith in the Philippines. So.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get the slides up for Marissa. Okay, there we go.
The Philippines, the pearl of the Orient Seas, its aspirations and inspirations. Next. The Philippines is a collection of islands located in Southeast Asia and was named after King Philip II of Spain. It is made up of approximately 7,641 islands, making it one of the largest archipelagos in the world. But more than 5,000 of the islands remain unnamed on most international maps. The Philippines is surrounded by the South China Sea to the north and west, by the Philippine Sea to the east, by the Celebes Sea to the south, and by the Sulu Sea to the southwest. It shares its maritime borders with Indonesia, China, Japan, Palau, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Taiwan. It is geographically divided into 3 major island areas: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The Philippines recognizes 8 major dialects: Bicol, Cebuano, Hiligaynon or Ilonggo, Ilocano, Kapampangan, Pangasinan, Tagalog, and Waray. Tagalog, the national language, as well as English, are taught all over the Philippines. Next. The Philippine history is divided into different periods. One is the prehistoric period from pre-900 CE, the pre-colonial period 900 till 1565, the Spanish period 1565 to 1898, the American period from 1898 to 1946, post-independence is from 1946 to 1965, under the Marcos regime from 1965 to 1986, and contemporary period from 1986 to the present. The major cultural influences of the Philippines include, during the pre-colonial period, Islam through the Arab sea merchants, Hindu through the Indian sea merchants, Chinese, specifically quite active during the Ming Dynasty, and during the post-colonial period, major influences include Spanish, American, and Japanese. Next. At the time of the pre-colonial period from 900 to 1565, the early inhabitants of the islands migrated in waves. The Negritos or Aitas were Black, pygmy-like individuals, composed the first group. The Austronesians, the second group, was from islands north of the Philippines, perhaps from an island now known as Taiwan. Next. The period of Spanish colonization was from 1521 to 1898, approximately 377 years. 1521 was when the ancient Filipinos made first contact with Europeans, when Ferdinand Magellan discovered the islands while searching for the Spice Islands. Present day, the Spice Islands are called Moluccas or Maluku Islands, situated north of Australia and west of New Guinea. In 1865, the first permanent settlement was established in the Philippines by Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. Spanish contributions to the Philippine culture include Christianity, the use of last names, Spanish language and numerals, Spanish monetary system, Catholic education, Western culture, including racial prejudice, the notion that white skin is superior to dark skin. Next. The American colonization was from 1898 to 1946, a period of 48 years. In 1898, the Philippines was ceded by Spain to the US after its defeat during the Spanish-American War. The American contributions to the Philippine culture include democratic government, educational system, English language, roads and bridges, transportation, communication, and pop culture. Next. World War II brought about the Japanese occupation of the Philippines from 1942 to 1945. Over 1 million people were killed during this time period. The changes brought about by war includes strict curfew, the use of Japanese currency, military government, reduction of neighborhood government systems by half. This government system or neighborhood government systems are called barangays. Cultural contributions brought about by the Japanese include changes in the cuisine or acceptance of miso or fermented soybeans, a traditional Japanese seasoning, tempura, and other dishes. Also, karaoke and anime were included in these cultural contributions. Next. Filipino identity was created primarily as a result of pre-colonial cultures, colonial influences, and foreign traders intermixing and gradually evolving together. In pre-colonial times, before the Spanish period, the Philippines was a divided set of nations, islands and tribes being ruled by their own kings, chieftains, lakans, rajas, datus, and sultans. Every nation has its own identity, and some are even part of a larger empire outside of what is now known as in the Philippines. Manila, for example, was once part of the Islamic Sultanate of Brunei, and the Sulu archipelago was also part of the Hindu Majapahit. The advent of colonial rule in the islands marked the beginning of the Philippines as an entity, a collection of Southeast Asian countries united under the Spanish Empire. During this time, the Chinese influence was also felt throughout Southeast Asia through trade, specifically during the Ming Dynasty and other earlier dynasties from as early as the 9th century. The blending of indigenous, colonial, and external influence is very evident in the historic arts and traditions of the country. Next. The Philippine culture takes pride in multiple native costumes, which had evolved over time. The most popular and better known are the Barong Tagalog and the Filipina or mestiza dress for women. Barong Tagalog is usually worn by men. Next. Filipino cuisine is also a combination of the culinary delights of both the East and the West. Roast pork, abundant varieties of seafood, and dishes made of chicken, pork, and beef were usually served in banana leaves, a tradition that is common in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Next. The sights and sound of the Philippines. These are the iconic pictures of what a street or a scenery in the Philippines look like. Jeepneys are small buses. They are known for their crowded seating and colorful decorations, which have become a widespread symbol of the Philippine culture and art. A vinta, the picture lower down, is a traditional outrigger boat from the Philippine island of Mindanao. It is well known for its colorful sails. Tricycles are motorcycles with a sidecar. It is the most common type of transportation in the rural areas. Caritela, also known as calesa or caromata, is a two-wheeled horse-drawn carriage used in the Philippines. It is commonly vividly painted and decorated. My favorite is the ice cream vendor. Sorbetes or ice cream are peddled by sorbeteros or ice cream vendor using colorfully painted wooden carts, which usually can accommodate 3 flavors, each in a large metal canister. Peddlers get their carts from ice cream makers scattered around the cities of the Philippines in the morning and walk the streets the whole day, calling customers from their houses by ringing a small handheld bell. Next. This slide shows the skyline of the cities of Manila and Makati, in contrast to the influence of Chinese and Islamic architecture in the south. Next. The Banawe rice terraces is a system of irrigated rice terraces in the mountains of north central Luzon that were created more than 2,000 years ago by the Ifugao people. Although located in several villages, They are collectively known as the Banawe Rice Terraces. The Chocolate Hills, a famous tourist attraction, are a geological formation in the Bohol province of the Philippines. There are at least 1,260 hills, but there may be as many as 1,776 hills spread over an area of more than 50 square kilometers. They are covered in green grass that turns brown during the dry season, hence the name, the Chocolate Hills. Next. This slide shows Taal volcano, which is actually a volcano within a volcano. The next picture to that shows Mayon volcano, and the lower picture shows the Kagsawa ruins, which shows the bell tower of a 16th century Franciscan church, which was all that was left after the Mayon volcano eruption, which flooded the whole area with lava in 1814. Next. One of the best spots to watch the sun kiss the sea in the Philippines, or probably in the world, is at Manila Bay and also Siargao. It is the most breathtaking scenery of a sunset, turning the sea and the skies into gold. Next. As with other aspects of its culture, Filipino folk dances are a combination of the influence of East and West, with Spanish, European, Japanese, Chinese, and Islamic influences. Next. An advertisement for the Bayanihan, the Philippine National Folk Dance Company, states, "Dancing is the loftiest, the most moving, the most beautiful of arts, because it is not a mere translation or abstraction from life. It is life itself." The following video is a short clip of samples of different folk dances in the Philippines. Next slide. Ancient Filipinos were animistic. The Negritos and Austronesians worshipped Anitos. They believed that everything has a spirit, from rocks and trees to animals and humans to natural phenomena. The word Anitos can also refer to the carved humanoid figures, the tao-tao, made of wood, stone, or ivory, that represent these spirits shown in the topmost black and white picture of this slide. Currently, the religion in the Philippines is marked by a majority, 91% of people being adherents of the Christian faith, most of whom are Catholics. 6% believe in Islam, 2% are Buddhists, and the rest make up the other religions, including the Baha'i Faith. Officially, the Philippines is a secular nation, with a constitution guaranteeing separation of church and state and requiring the government to respect all religious beliefs equally. Next. Most traditional celebrations in the Philippines are related to religious commemorations and devotions. The fiesta, celebrated in each community, gives homage to the patron saint of the locality on his or her feast day, usually on the day they passed away. Worship of the Santo Niño, the infant Jesus, is commemorated in the festivals of the Ati-Atihan, Sinulog, and Dinagyang. As in other Christian communities and countries, Christmas or Pasko is a glorious celebration in the Philippines. Santa Cruzan or Flores de Mayo, or Flowers of May festivity, commemorates the search of the Holy Cross by Queen Helena and her son, the newly converted Emperor Constantine the Great. These are but a few of rituals, dances, and festivals that abound in the islands, that is part of the culture of the Philippines. Next. The Baha'i Faith in the Philippines. Next. In 1938, Felix Medela became the first Filipino Baha'i. His first encounter with the Baha'i faith was in 1924, when a purchase he made was wrapped in a piece of old newspaper, which contained an article by Martha Root about the religion. As the author's address did not appear in the article, it was another 14 years before he encountered more about the religion. In the early spring of 1937, Luli Albie Matthews arrived in Manila on board the ship Franconia. As the boat was to dock for only a few hours, she managed to place in a college library a few pamphlets for the shelf of comparative religions. A few months later, on a visit to Manila from Solano, Nueva Vizcaya, Mr. Medela came across the literature. This started a series of correspondence with the Baha'i Publishing Committee of the United States. With Medela so fired up, he immediately taught his family and friends. Shortly before World War II, the Baha'is of Solano numbered around 50. When war broke out, all communications ceased. Immediately after the war, contact was reestablished through Alvin Blum, who was attached to the medical unit of the United States Army. Hitchhiking to Solano, which was in ruins, he located the Medelas living in impoverished conditions. Of the 50 enrolled Baha'is, 25 had been killed or missing. The others had survived by hiding in rice fields for 3 years. The first Baha'i institution in the Philippines, the local spiritual assembly of Solano in the province of Nueva Vizcaya, was formed in 1939, a year after Felix Medela became the first Baha'i in the Philippines. Next. In 1926, both Siegfried Schappleffler and Martha Root, both later entitled as Hands of the Cause, were able to give talks in Manila. Next. In the 1960s, while the Vietnam War claimed the lives of thousands of youths, inspired by the intrepid hand of the cause of God, Rahmatullah Muhajir, hundreds, if not thousands of student pioneers began a massive effort to teach the Baha'i cause in the deep jungles of Africa, in the exotic culture of India, and the warm islands of Asia as well as the Pacific, including the Philippines. During this period, the only hand of the cause to visit the interior of the country was Rahmatullah Muhajir, although Agnes Baldwin Alexander and Collis Featherstone also visited the country. Next. In 1972, tensions grew between the people, the government, and adherents of Islam because of the Munich Massacre in the 1972 Summer Olympics. The Philippines withdrew their team, and Muslim separatists among the Moros of Bangsamoro had violent clashes with the government. In July 1972, 3 Iranian Baha'i students of Mindanao State University in Marawi, Lanao del Sur, were murdered. Parviz Sadeki, Faramars Verjdani, and Parviz Furuki were killed while travel teaching in the rural Muslim areas of Marawi. After recovering their mutilated bodies from a shallow grave, a convocation was held. The funeral procession was attended by thousands of people, including fellow students, faculty members, and university officials. In his presentation, Stephen will read the message of the Universal House of Justice to the Baha'is of the world, addressing the murder of these students. Next. Baha'u'llah wrote, "Love is a light that never dwelleth in a heart possessed by fear." In the aftermath of the death of the 3 students, more student pioneers came from Iran. They became the backbone of the Filipino Bahá'í community and were instrumental in teaching the cause of Baha'u'llah to hundreds of Filipinos. The 1979 Iranian Revolution left the Philippine Bahá'í community with very few Iranian pioneers, as the majority of the students left the islands. Next. In the early 1960s, during a period of accelerated growth, the Bahá'í community grew from 200 in 1960 to 1,000 by 1962 and 2,000 by 1963. In 1964, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of the Philippines was elected, and by 1980, there were 64,000 Bahá'ís and 45 local assemblies. The Bahá'ís had been active in multi-interfaith developments, and the Association of Religion Data Archives estimates the Bahá'í population of the Philippines at about 272,600. Next. The next slides will be presented by Stephen Ramo. Stephen Ramo is a Filipino Bahá'í who served at the Bahá'í World Center for 2.5 years. Stephen and his wife Agnes are proud parents of their daughter, Stephanie Ruhiyyih. Stephen was born 58 years ago in Tacloban City in the Visayas, but now he lives with his family in Antipolo City, which is an hour away from Manila. Stephen works for JPMorgan Chase and Company and serves as the chairman of the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of the Philippines. Stephen?
Thank you, Marissa. Friends, it's my pleasure to be with you tonight. Um, I vividly remember my visit to the graves of the three Iranian friends who died, and my heart was pumping hard at that time because actually I couldn't locate it properly because it was quite bushy already when I visited in the 1980s. But thank you, Marissa, for giving me this opportunity to make a presentation of the Philippine Baha'i community as the current situation. As mentioned, having the population of the Philippine Baha'i community is quite a challenge. Um, Somebody mentioned to me last night that it's about declaration cards that we have in one of the chests at the National Bahá'í Center actually lists about 100,000, 120,000, I should say, listed as Bahá'ís. However, we now rely on the what we call the Statistical Report Program, the SRP. And according to our lead statistician, friends included in the list are these people. So based on the records, we have about 16,261 friends. In North Luzon, there's about 1,750. Central Luzon, 2,396. And in the Midwest, we have about 4,000 Bahá'ís. And in Palawan, which is the last frontier of the Philippines, which is almost part of a different country, I should say, has about 1,536 friends. However, I should say that the bulk of the activities of the Bahá'ís in every communities that we have include those who are not declared as Bahá'ís. So, for example, in Palawan, 1,536 declared Bahá'ís is far too minimal, really. If you see the clusters having about 600 core activities, which means it could have about 300 devotional meetings, and the rest are those educational activities that we have. The children's classes for children and the junior youth spiritual empowerment program, the JYSEP, and of course the study circles and the campaigns for the growth of the human capacity or human resources of the faith. As in all cases all over the globe, we have a minimum of 4 core activities, devotional meetings, children's classes, junior youth groups, and study circles. This is an example of typical devotional gatherings of friends, quite informal, you know, in their setting. It could be in the kitchen, could be in the back of the house. This one is in the front yard, and its main aim is to establish spiritual unity within a community. And this has been quite really helpful, especially these days in the times of this pandemia, that many communities were quite isolated, and the spiritual unity brought by the devotional meetings is quite a powerful instrument, actually. So we have about 8,465 homes. Again, these are listed in the SRP, which first impression to me is quite actually low. It could be in the 20,000 actually homes all over the country having devotional meetings, but reporting as usual is a challenge. There are about 31,000 listed as attendees to these devotional meetings. and including about 18,430 friends of the faith. Classes for children. This is a typical classes for children somewhere in the North Luzon area, where children draws on certain of their notebooks, and it's quite a sight to see them actually very happy drawing all these things that are brought about by their classes. There are about 520 classes listed in the SRP, with about 5,915 participants, including 3,492 who are children of parents who are not Bahá'ís. The Junior Youth Program was introduced way back in about 2003, 2004, but it has remained really one of the strongest influence in the country. They have included now what they call the Youth Gathering, which introduces the mission of the youth at this time. This was actually part of the program way back in 2013, where we had youth gatherings all over the globe, and they are using the same materials. The youth gathering is one, I should say, activity or tactic that is used by communities in order to entice youths to enter the institute process. So usually you have 3 days of youth gathering, and then followed by intensive program for book 1. Of course, the JY program is for ages 11, 12, 13, and 14. So for the 3 to 4 years that they have this program, they get to be immersed in about 10 to 12 JY books, actually, which is really thrilling. 1 year, they could have 3 or 4 volumes of these. And it's quite exciting to see them proceed to book 1, actually. Total groups listed in the SRP is 395 groups, but this is way low, actually. We have about 3,162 participants, including about 2,556 friends of the faith. Simoy ng Pagpapatibay is Breezes of Confirmation, translated into Tagalog. And this is a very popular entry in the JY SEP program, the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. And many of the friends who are neighbors of these children already know about the story of Musonda and her cousin Rose, which is thrilling, actually. And of course, the study circles, which is called by the House of Justice as the engine of growth, because this is the activity that tries to empower the friends spiritually to take charge of the evolution and transformation of communities through the institute process. And this is one example of an institute campaign. But right now, actually, most of our activities are online, just like what we're doing now because of the pandemic. But some communities are lucky enough not to have been touched somehow strongly by the pandemic. And this is one area in Punta Apari, which is almost touching Batanes Island. Batanes Island is like a stone throw away from Taiwan, actually. So the study circle is one systematic way of establishing a culture of study, action, and reflection and consultation, which brings more study, more action, and reflection. And of course, as we know, the study circles bring about path of service. Book one would actually entice you to share prayers and meditations, usually prayers that are short, and meditation like the hidden words and the four valleys and the seven valleys of Baha'u'llah. So you kind of is quickened to share it with your family about a hidden word or two, and then this is usually the seedbed of the devotional character of the community, because this would be established and it would be weekly already, wherein the sharing of the hidden words continues and more prayers are presented. And so you have a gathering of a few families in that area. So this, for example, you have about 10 youths here. So the 10 youths are enticed to bring to their families a prayer book and a hidden word, and that starts their own program of devotional meetings or devotional character of the community. In the list, we have about 443 study circles with about 2,036 participants and around 1,100 friends of the faith. Marissa already mentioned about the local spiritual assembly. This is a typical after Rizwan, I should say, after Rizwan election, they have this portrait, and this is somewhere in a cluster we call Cordon in Santiago, Isabela. Santiago, Isabela was frequented by the late hand of the cause, Dr. Ramatullah Muhajir, mentioned by Marissa earlier. And we have in this picture actually quite a family or two which base their entry into the faith in those meetings with the hand of the cause and other American pioneers who came at that time. That must have been, he was already a hand of the cause, so it must have been in the late 50s when Dr. Muhajir was frequenting the islands. And I think sometime in the 60s, he stayed for a straight 2 years with his family. If you see the caption, it says the National Spiritual Assembly of the Bahá'ís of the Philippines, Solano, Nueva Vizcaya, Philippine Islands, or PI. This is actually a local spiritual assembly. And this must be the first local spiritual assembly of the Philippines. Mr. Medela is found on standing on the far right. So this is the local spiritual assembly of the Bahá'ís of Solano. Solano is the very first town in the Philippines embracing the faith. We have communities that has no local spiritual assembly. So we have about 1,200 of these localities spread all over the country, which has activities and core activities, and some of them have local spiritual assemblies. This is a picture of a two local spiritual assemblies meeting in a Baha'i center to be being constructed actually somewhere in Pinili in central Luzon. And this is a picture of a presentation supposed to be for parents, but many children came. Usually they have this presentation to entice parents to bring their children to the core activities like children's classes and the junior youth spiritual empowerment program. Now, in the last two plans of the House of Justice, they emphasize the clustering of the countries, and we have about 179 shares of the clusters of the 5,000 clusters of the Baha'i world. So out of 179 of these clusters, already 155 are in the intensive program of growth, and 39 of these are what we call embracing large numbers. In one of the letters of the House of Justice written in December of 2015, they also mentioned in a few paragraphs about embracing large numbers. Basically, these are clusters that has a minimum of 100 core activities. And in an intensive program of growth, which has a basic core activities of about 30 to 40, half of them could be devotional in character. So if you reach embracing large number status, it's quite a phenomenon. Um, the biggest, I think, right now is in Palawan. Two communities there has an average of about 600 core activities. So we are now about 25 clusters short to make all our 179 clusters to be in the intensive program of growth, at least before the end of this one-year plan. Now, this is an extract of a letter sent to us by the Universal House of Justice about the killings in Marawi City. May I read? With feelings of deep sorrow, we relate to the Baha'i world the distressing news surrounding the murder of 3 Iranian Baha'i student pioneers to the Philippines. Parviz Sadiki, Faramars Wujdani, and Parviz Furugi were among a number of Iranian youths who answered the call to pioneers. With 11 others, they registered at the what they locally call the Musuan University in Mindanao, which is in the heart of Marawi City, with the intention, of course, of completing their studies and teaching the faith. It was one, I think, Sunday morning, they left for a teaching trip, and sadly, they never came back. You know, a party to search them occurred a day after. But one thing with this, President Tamano of this school, who became eventually a senator of the Republic, was very vocal and very present in the campaign to really declare this situation a very grave situation. They had been shot, and their bodies were actually mutilated, and at least 2 of them were beheaded. And then there was a program to rebury them in the Baha'i burial, which I mentioned earlier that I tried to find, but I couldn't. These areas is still quite not, we are not encouraging friends to teach in these areas. There are about 4 provinces in the country in the southern central Mindanao areas where Baha'is are not encouraged to go because of the activities of some extremists in these communities. You see, Mr. Medela was quite a, I would call a visionary, a seer. He has been, he's been soul searching actually. A grandson told me that it was his 4th religion actually when he discovered the Baha'i faith. And it was in a local bakery where we usually use newspapers to wrap pandesal, the bread that we buy and for breakfast. And Mr. Medela noticed an article in one of the Manila newspapers. We haven't actually found the original article. It's just been a challenge for us to find it. But that was his link basically to the idea of the Baha'i faith. And many years later, when he was in Manila, I read somewhere that he missed actually the Matthews just a few days back. You know, when the Matthews were stranded in Manila, where they deposited a few pamphlets in Spanish to a local public library. It was quite a story because they had to go through the Bishop of Manila, the Mayor of Manila, and all these protocols in order for them to deposit the few pamphlets that they had in Spanish. And lo and behold, Mr. Medela came and read them and copied. I was told he copied everything that was written in those pamphlets. And that was the start really of his being organized as a Baha'i, because he had this information about the Baha'i faith. I think he was already a Baha'i by that time, but he couldn't find ways and means to communicate to whom. But with those pamphlets, he was able to communicate, I think, with the late hand of the cause, Horace Holly, who was acting as a secretary of the National Assembly at that time in the United States. So that was the start of his conversation with the American Baha'i community, and also with the Guardian. He had a few letters from the beloved Guardian, actually. At first, I was told that he was in uniform. He thought that Baha'i should be in uniform. So this is also a Baha'i uniform at that time for men. They had this flag because he was also a an old guard in the Revolutionary Army of Aguinaldo at the time of the transition from the Spanish-American War to the Philippine-American War, and then after that. So he was a product of that period, actually, where a man has to be in uniform when they have this, calling or something. Eventually, the Guardian has to write them that you don't have to have a flag because there was a Baha'i flag, there was a Baha'i uniform, and all that. But we are very proud that many of his families are very active in the faith. I heard that one of the grandsons actually is an auxiliary board member somewhere in Texas, I believe. His name is Dr. Roland Medela. He's a direct descendant of Mr. Felix Medela Sr. I heard from Amatul Baha herself that Mr. Felix Medela was declared by the Guardian as the first Filipino Baha'i. But of course, we have notes and memoirs of a certain Baha'i named Hussein Tuti, who was traveling in Mindanao as early as the 1890s, 1900s, wherein there were declarations, actually, I believe. And also in the States, at the time of Abdul Baha, there were quite some Filipinos who embraced the faith. But it was Mr. Felix Medela who was declared by the Guardian as the first Filipino Baha'i. I remember in Malaysia, they had the same situation wherein some tribes actually entered the faith before Mr. Yankee Leong, but it was Mr. Leong who was declared by the Guardian as the first Malaysian Baha'i. And this is a community at the very early stage. Mr. Medela is also standing on the far right. And you have here two American friends, actually. I was told that they were members of the embassy staff in those days. And this is a foundation of their first Baha'i Center, actually, in Solano. Another picture of the very early stage. Mr. Medela is again situated on the far right, standing. So that's it, my friends. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have some questions that we are able to answer. Does anybody has a few questions?
Yes, we can unmute and ask, or just raise your hand if you prefer. I think Eileen has one.
Oh, just a quick comment. I remember that a very large number of Filipinos were serving at the Bahá'í World Center while I was there. And the Philippines has really sent far more than what you might call a quota of volunteers to serve at the World Center.
Mhm. Yeah, there was a time that we were like 30, 32 when
Yeah.
I was there with Marissa, and it was quite a thrill. We had 2 occasions where we had a Filipino night. I'm sure Eileen would remember those nights.
Yes, I do.
We had a sample of what Marissa presented earlier of the folklore dances and the food, the cuisine, and also, of course, the costumes that we wore at that time.
Yes, yes. The dancing was excellent and everything else.
Yes. Thank you, Eileen. All right. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, Stephen. I saw there are a lot more traditional dances than I realized in the Philippines. I hardly knew any of them. There was one where they were dancing on, looked like benches that were being held by other people.
Yes.
That looked pretty scary.
So
Stephen and Marissa, this was absolutely wonderful, very, very enjoyable. Unfortunately, my video on the computer is not working, only the audio is working. So I wanted to thank you so much. We learned a lot, and that's why we're not asking any questions. Very, very thorough. The one thing that struck me is that with those early spiritual assemblies, usually around the Baha'i world, you see pioneers among assembly members. And here they were all
Locals.
Filipino Baha'is, locals. It's just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Bahia.
You're welcome, Bahia. I think Berdina wanted to ask a question. Berdina, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Marissa. It's an excellent presentation, and it made me think about how much in time that a newspaper article about the Baha'i Faith can spread, and then how Felix had learned that through the Baha'i Faith, but maybe at the time no one was interested. So when we publish information about the Baha'i Faith or about articles on Baha'i, it can have an equal impact in other places. When somebody's wrapping something or doing something with a newspaper. It was a very insightful presentation, and the heart of the Filipinos was, I could feel it. Thank you for your, Stephen and Marissa.
You're welcome.
You're most welcome.
And thank you for acknowledging.
This reminds me of the Ihtifal programs we used to have at the World Center, right?
Yes. Anyone else have a question or comment?
I was curious if you had anything else that you felt on your heart you wanted to share, either you or Marissa.
We do appreciate everyone for joining us today. And I most certainly enjoyed the presentation. I mean, by giving it, right? So what inspired me was the story of Felix Medela, because he was very persistent in, looking for the Baha'i faith. Although, as Stephen had said, he had joined, 4 religions prior to that. And for 14 years, he didn't have any contact with any Baha'is. But it's still, it was, I think, in his heart that, he wanted to know more about the Baha'i faith. And that's how, he started researching about the Baha'i faith. One of the friends had asked me, why he didn't write the newspaper for the address of the author of the article. And I told her, think about how it was in 1924 and think about where he was at that time. It's one of the rural areas in the Philippines, quite far from Manila. So you have to know about, it's not like the internet nowadays when you can go into your computer and type something and it will be, presented to you, or the answer will be presented to you. But at that time, you need to know the address of the newspaper. You need to know who to address the letter to and that kind of stuff. So I think, if you look back, it was a hardship for him to find out more about the article, but he was persistent.
So our lesson in that is that when we leave pamphlets and messages around, we should always make sure that it contains some contact information.
Yes. And not wait for 14 years.
Yes.
But I would like to mention, there's this person named Sergeant Alvin Blum. If I'm not mistaken, he was an American Baha'i who became a Knight of Baha'u'llah somewhere in the Solomon Islands, actually. Because many years ago, I met an old lady. She said that she saw Mr. Blum in the boondocks of Solano. When everything was flattened because of the bombing. Here comes an American who came from the middle part of the country, who was a part of the what they call the Armada of General MacArthur. And Marissa mentioned that he was part of the medical staff of the forces of the Allied landings in October of 1944. But this lady told me that the reason why he was in Solano is because of the Guardian. The Guardian, I don't know how he was told, but he was told to find the Baha'is and connect them back to the faith. So this guy, he who came with the landings of probably 100,000 soldiers, when at that time the Philippines was under the Japanese Imperial Army. So they call it the Leyte landings, when the return of General Douglas MacArthur. This guy traveled from Leyte to the north of Luzon. I don't know how he did it. I haven't found any write-up about how he did it, because they said people were retreating from the north, trying to retreat the bombings and the killings and everything, because the Japanese were just running amok, killing anyone on sight. And here was this guy traveling up north, and then they said sometimes he had to walk, hitchhike, but all of these was in the context of a war. I don't know how he reached Solano, but there was a write-up that says he was in Solano, he found Solano, but there was nobody there. You know what he found? He found an old signage that says, Baha'i Reading Center, you're welcome. So that's how he said that, and now I'm at home. I just have to find where they are. So he looked into the villages and the boondocks to locate the Baha'is, and he found Mr. Medela, actually. Because of that, he was able to connect them to the American Baha'i community, because that was the most established administratively, and books and prayer books and aid and assistance came in trickles, and then the formulation of this community is already brought forth. So what I'm saying is the beginnings of the Philippine Baha'i community as we know it now cannot have been uh, you know, established without the help of the American Baha'is actually at that time, and of course until now. So we thank you for the American Baha'i community for that, especially Sergeant Blum, who had the courage, the stamina, and the fortunes to be alive to reach Solano and bring the message of the Guardian and tell the Guardian that the Baha'is, Filipino Baha'is are there and well. You know, it brings me emotional because I met the old lady and she was telling me that they were very hungry. They were, you know, very, very exhausted. You can just imagine, you know, the Second World War. And then here is an American man coming to say that to them, Allah Abha, I am a Baha'i, and I'm here to you know, to see whether you're okay and what can I help and everything. So that was really emotional for this old lady. She was in her 80s when I met her way back in 2002. I do remember that conversation. I called her a golden chain to the past because I haven't found anyone who remembers Mr. Blum or even the mention of Mr. Blum. He was the only one that who saw Mr. Blum who was alive at that time. Yes, Shazin.
Yes, there's no question. I wanted to clarify something that Steve said about the 3 martyrs in the Philippines. He mentioned that one of them, Parviz Ruhiyyih's head was never discovered. And the body were, you know, torn apart. I want just to mention that Filipinos are not violent people. Basically,
Yes.
they are very friendly people, and they got the Spanish culture of fiesta, and they're all music lovers. And don't think that they are violent people. In fact, they're very friendly with the foreigners. Why? Because all of them are foreigners from different islands. When you hop from one island to another island, the culture is totally different. They don't even understand the language. So they're all foreigners getting together. They're very friendly people. However, in the south, in
Mindanao.
In Mindanao, because of the Muslim militia was led by Abu Sayyaf, and they were constantly fed by some other countries like Saudi Arabia, and they are violent people. Just like, you know, recently you saw Taliban in Afghanistan, how violent they are, but not all Afghans are like that. Poetry in Afghanistan and music in Afghanistan is greatly appreciated. When people, they know poetry and music, it means they have a sensitive soul. But part of them, some of them have been radicalized, like in the southern Philippines. Otherwise, Filipinos are very, very friendly people, and they mingle with everybody. Just, I wanted to clarify that one.
Thank you. Because a neighboring province of Lanao, which is Bukidnon, many hundreds actually are very active in the faith, and I have the privilege of being in constant communication with them, and I'm even you know, telling that probably you're the first candidate of a local house of worship in the next plan because of their activities numbering in the hundreds of core activities. So thank you for that clarification, Shazin.
Marissa.
Yes, ma'am.
You forgot to mention the Filipino nurses are an excellent nurses.
Thank you.
Best surgeon, open heart surgeon.
Nuri, you muted yourself.
Sorry. We have one of the best open heart surgeon from Philippines, which people from all over the world came to the hospital for him to take care of him.
Thank you.
I have worked with a lot of Filipino nurses. Honestly, they all were wonderful.
Thank you so much.
You should mention nurses. Oh.
Certainly, the World Center has benefited so much from that. It would not have survived without healthcare providers from the Philippines. Really,
Yes.
truly.
And one of the descendants of Felix Medela served as one of the staff nurse at the Bahá'í World Center. His name was Franco Aquino.
Franco.
Yes.
Shazin, do you have another question? Comment?
Again, another comment. You were talking about the education, doctor, nurses in the Philippines. The Santa Thomas University in Manila was established 600 years ago. So education was very important in the Philippines. From 600 years ago, people were encouraged to go to university and be educated. And one thing I want to mention that there is one university in Manila that it has aeronautical engineering. And one of the engineers that designed the first vehicle on the moon was graduated from that university.
Wow.
That was Fiati.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Thank you, Shazin, for that.
How prevalent is the English language in the Philippines? Like, what is the percentage of people that speak it?
I would say that almost everyone can understand English, but the conversation would be a challenge for many. It's English is endemic. It's already part of our culture. We read and write in English and converse in English, but a good number would have a problem, a challenge of conversation for a long time in English. But they would understand. If you speak in English, they would understand, but they would probably reply to you in Tagalog or in Visayan. But they would understand what you're saying, basically. So it's very prevalent. English is very prevalent.
Is Spanish the same? Somewhat like the next big language?
No more, actually. That was a sad part of the history when the Spaniards left. It brought with them, I would say, the Spanish language. But the culture of Spain stayed, the food stayed, and the fiesta and everything, and the dress. But somehow the language disappeared. I don't know how to explain it, but we no longer speak Spanish except for 6 units in college, where it is required for us to learn 6 units of Spanish. But when you leave the university, it doesn't sink in because you don't have a practice like English, So it's basically lost in the culture already.
You hear about a lot of Filipino foods. Is it the balut? Is that still something that's popular, or is it kind of not so much? Or maybe you can explain what it is for those who are not familiar.
These are balut. There's 2 versions. There's Pinoy and there's balut itself. But basically, it's a chicken that is kind of heated up, that it's already cooked. So you crack it. So instead of having just the egg and the yolk, you have a full chicken inside in that small shell. So the first thing that you do is you put a needle in it and drink the liquid. But if you don't like that, because it's quite delicious to drink it. But me, I'm not a fan of balut, but I know that it's still there because I hear almost literally every day somebody selling balut. It's being brought, especially in the evenings. There would be someone who would be calling to people to buy balut. So it's a chicken that is already cooked. It's
When you
heated up.
say cook, like it's a baby chicken in the egg,
Yeah,
right?
a very baby chicken. Yeah, all cramped up inside that small egg, size. So you see the form. You could see the head, the legs, and everything, and even some hair in it. And the way they cook, I saw it when I was very small. The way they would cook it, very slight, and then they would sell it. Um, of course, not everybody likes it, but it's quite delicious, actually.
I think the empanada makes up for it. I think everyone loves the empanada.
Yes,
Probably
empanada. Oh,
The lumpia,
and there are versions. Yeah, lumpia.
pancit.
Yeah, the
Payman,
noodles.
Payman,
yes.
having the food inside still the egg or a body of the mother is not only in the Philippines. In the Middle East, they have that to Delhi also. So when the ship is still in the womb of the mother, they open it up and eat it. So, and also pig is the same thing. It's not only in the Philippines, and it's not only the egg. In all over the world, somehow they like the undeveloped baby. I don't know, is it cannibalism or whatever it is? I don't know. They like to have it take it out of the body of the mother and eat it. So in the Middle East, there are two.
Yeah, I mean, talking about odd foods like beef tongue. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has experienced beef
Lengua.
tongue. It's one of the most, if you don't know that what you're eating, and if you taste it, it's one of the most delicious pieces of meat. But when you explain it to people, they kind of go, what? I even gave it to my son. I said, hey, try this. What do you think? He said, it's excellent. I said, no, it's beef tongue. And he said, oh, I would try it again. So it was interesting.
Yes. Thank you.
Very good. Well,
all
thank
right.
you to everyone.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much.
So Peter, you want to lead us off for tonight?
Yeah. I had one more question for Marissa. Is there anywhere in the Northern Virginia area we can get Filipino food?
Unfortunately, we don't have good Filipino restaurants in the Northern Virginia area. Most of them are in California, where there are a lot of Filipinos, but not in the Northern Virginia area.
Okay.
You have to get yourself invited to Marissa and Shazin's house.
There you go.
That's the sure way.
Or we can go visit Stephen.
Yes, you're most welcome here.
Yeah, I'd say that'd be a better bet than anything we find here. The balut is the freshest there, I'm sure.
Hey, Stephen, buddy, it was wonderful seeing you.
Oh, thank you. Same here, Shazin. Same here.
It's just a beautiful presentation, very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell.
Yes, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Marissa. And thank you to everyone who joined today. The past videos of this series are on the YouTube channel, where this one will be posted as well. I put the link in the chat, or you can just search YouTube for Northern Virginia Bahá'í Center Workshop Series. And we hope you can join us again for future presentations hosted by the Northern Virginia Bahá'í Center Task Force. And we will now close with the prayer. As I find the share screen button, there it is.
I'll say goodnight and thank you to Peter and Marissa and Stephen for their presentation, and Shanice for his suggestions.
Thank you. Berdina, are you joining us from the Virginia area? Or
yes, yeah, Luray. You have a good memory, Payman. Yes, Luray, Virginia.
Thanks. So nice to have you.
Thank you. I try to show up once in a while.
From Harrisonburg. from Harrisonburg.
Oh, Shanaz, aloha. Yes,
Aloha, dear.
yes, bless your hearts. Shah and Shanaz. Nice to
Yes, my
hear
dear.
your voice, and I hope you're happy where
Me
you
too.
are now.
Thank you. Very happy. Thank you.
I think of you often. Aloha.
Thank you, Aloha.
Aloha.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.
Stay for the last prayer. It's beautiful.
Yes, I'll stay for the prayer. Excuse me.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they're all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered beneath thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty, and all are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all, dost shelter all, confers life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree, and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family, and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful. Thou art the forgiving, who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Peter,
night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Peter,
Bye-bye.
can you share the link to the prayer?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh,
The
it's
video.
by Alessandro. Okay. Thank you very much, friends.
You'll put it in the chat.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Maybe Peter can do that before we log off.
Sorry, for which one? The video that was just shown, or?
Just shared, the prayer that you just shared.
Yeah. I can do that right now.
Stephen, what time is it in the Philippines now?
It's 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
8:10.
wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Well, thank you for waking up early for us.
Oh, the pleasure is mine,
Thank
Payman.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We can use this
You're
in
welcome.
an upcoming program, a public Zoom program. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Have
All
a
right.
great night. and
Thank you,
morning. Bye-bye.
Marissa, Shazin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very
Take care.
much.
Thank you.
Payman,
Bye-bye.
thank
Bye-bye.
you. And Jones.
Thank you. So
Bye-bye.
nice to
And
meet you.
thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All
Thank
the
you,
best.
Bahia.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Lee and Yot and Lynn, thank you very much for joining us.
Yes. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you,
Thank
Peter.
you.
Send
Bye-bye.
my love to Farah.
I will.
Yes. Thank you.